The gas station security camera would later show exactly what happened at 11:22 p.m. on a Friday night in Hargrove County, Tennessee. A black woman was parked under a bright light in a busy gas station parking lot, reclined in her driver's seat, completely still. She was not causing any trouble. She was not blocking traffic. She was doing something millions of Americans do every single year on long road trips. She was taking a rest break. Deputy Craig Mossier spotted her car during a routine patrol. He pulled up slowly, shining his flashlight through the window. Then he called it in. The plates came back clean. No warrants, no flags, no reason whatsoever to take this any further. He got out of his cruiser anyway. What Deputy Mossier didn't know, or didn't care to find out, was that the woman resting in that car was US Federal Marshal Diane Holloway, a 17-year veteran of federal law enforcement, a woman who had spent nearly 2 decades protecting courts, transporting dangerous criminals, and risking her life to uphold the very laws Mossier was supposed to enforce. What he did next would be the worst decision of his entire career, one that would cost him his badge, destroy his reputation, land him in federal prison, and end with an $8.7 million lawsuit that would shake an entire county sheriff's department to its core. The camera was rolling, the audio was clear, multiple witnesses were already watching, and Deputy Craig Mossier was about to learn that some mistakes cannot be walked back, no matter how badly you want to. Before we go any further, I want to know, where are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments right now. And if you're new to this channel, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. This story is only going to get more intense from here, and you do not want to miss what happens next. Diane Holloway had been a US Federal Marshal for 17 years. Before joining the Marshal Service, she spent 4 years working as a criminal investigator for the Department of Homeland Security. She had personally overseen the capture of over 40 fugitives. She had testified in federal court more than 60 times. She had worked cases that most people only see in crime documentaries: kidnapping recoveries, witness protection details, high-risk fugitive transfers across state lines. She was the kind of officer who showed up early and stayed late, the kind who mentored younger colleagues and kept detailed records because she understood that good documentation was the difference between justice and chaos. Her supervisors described her as one of the most disciplined professional agents they had ever worked with. She had received commendations 3 times in her career. She had never once had a disciplinary mark in her file. Outside of work, Diane was a mother of 2. She coached a youth soccer team on weekends when her schedule allowed. She had spent years volunteering at a community legal clinic that helped low-income families navigate the court system. She believed, genuinely and deeply, in the law, what it was supposed to be and what it was supposed to do for people. That Friday night, Diane was driving from her home in Virginia to a federal courthouse in Memphis, Tennessee. She had an early morning hearing the following day, a high-priority fugitive case she had been building for 11 months. The defendant was dangerous. The case was complex. She needed to be sharp and focused when she walked into that courtroom. It was a 13-hour drive, and she had started early enough, but somewhere around hour 8, fatigue hit hard. Her eyes were getting heavy. Her reaction time was slowing down. She recognized the signs immediately. She had briefed officers on the dangers of drowsy driving more times than she could count. She did exactly what every driving safety expert tells you to do. She pulled off the highway, found a well-lit gas station, parked in a visible spot directly under a bright overhead light, locked her doors, set a 45-minute alarm on her phone, and closed her eyes. Simple, responsible, sensible. The right call, every single way you look at it. She had no idea that the next hour would change her life and destroy someone else's career completely. Deputy Craig Mossier had been with the Hargrove County Sheriff's Department for 6 years. He patrolled the highway stretch that ran past that gas station almost every night. At 11:22 p.m., he pulled into the parking lot as part of his standard loop and noticed Diane's car, a dark blue sedan with Virginia plates, parked near the building with the engine off. He ran the plates. The car came back completely clean. No flags, no warrants, no issues of any kind. Mossier parked his cruiser directly behind her car anyway, blocking it in. He sat there for a moment, watching. Then he got out. He walked up to the driver's side window slowly, flashlight raised, and shone it directly through the glass at Diane's face. She stirred, disoriented, squinting against the sudden light. She had been asleep for maybe 20 minutes. He knocked on the glass, not lightly, the way you might knock to check on someone, but hard, with the back of his knuckle, the kind of knock that is meant to startle. Diane sat up, looked at him, and rolled the window down. She asked calmly what the problem was. Mossier didn't explain. He didn't introduce himself properly. He didn't ask if she was okay. He just asked her what she was doing there, in a tone that already had an answer baked into it. She told him she had pulled over to rest during a long drive. She told him she was a federal marshal traveling for a work assignment. She told him her credentials were in the glove box and asked his permission to reach for them. Mossier didn't respond to any of that. Instead, he asked her if she had been drinking. She told him she had not. She hadn't had a single drink. Not that day, not that night. He asked her to step out of the car. Diane stayed calm. She said she was happy to cooperate, but she again identified herself as a federal officer and asked if she could show him her badge first. She told him exactly where it was. She was giving him every possible opportunity to slow this down, to take a breath, to ask a basic question that would have ended this interaction in 60 seconds. Mossier didn't slow down. He told her that if she was really a federal marshal, she could prove it after she got out of the car. Around the parking lot, a few people were filling up their tanks and coming in and out of the gas station convenience store. Nobody else was being approached. Nobody else was having their night interrupted. Just Diane. She noticed. She had trained herself to notice everything. It was part of the job. It had to be. Diane stepped out of the car slowly, both hands raised and clearly visible, moving with the careful deliberateness of someone who had spent 17 years knowing exactly how these situations could spiral when an officer's adrenaline was up and their judgment was compromised. She told Mossier again, clearly, directly, without any aggression, that she was a federal marshal, that her credentials were in the glove box, and that she had not been drinking or doing anything illegal. She offered to do a field sobriety test right there in the parking lot if he felt it was necessary. She offered him every way out. Mossier was not interested in any of it. He told her to place her hands on the roof of the car. She complied, without argument, without hesitation. He patted her down. Right there in the gas station parking lot under the overhead lights with other customers walking past, staring at a woman in business casual travel clothes being searched on the outside of her locked car at nearly midnight. A man pumping gas on the other side of the lot had been watching from the moment Mossier got out of his cruiser. Something about the whole scene looked wrong to him. The woman was clearly calm and cooperative. The officer's energy was aggressive in a way that didn't match what he was looking at. He pulled out his phone and hit record. His video would later capture everything the gas station's fixed security camera missed, the angles, the expressions, the full sequence of what was said and done. Mossier then opened Diane's car door without her consent and began looking through the interior. She told him, calmly and on camera, that she did not consent to a search of her vehicle. He continued anyway. He opened the glove box, the exact place she had told him twice that her credentials were, and found them immediately. Her badge, her federal identification card, her marshal service credentials, everything right there, exactly where she said. He looked at them. He set them on the seat. Then he called for backup. Have you or someone you know ever been treated like a suspect for doing absolutely nothing wrong? Type yes in the comments if you know this feeling. This was Mossier's second massive mistake, and the consequences were already stacking up fast. He told Diane the credentials could be fake. He told her he had no way to verify them on scene. He said she was going to have to come with him. Diane's composure at this point was extraordinary. She did not raise her voice. She did not make any sudden moves. She kept her face neutral and her voice steady. She told Mossier to call the US Marshal Service directly to verify her identity. She gave him the number from memory. She told him exactly who to ask for and what to say. He did not make the call. By now, 4 separate people in the parking lot had their phones out. A woman who had pulled in to get gas had seen enough within 30 seconds to know something was very wrong. She sent a text to her sister that simply said, "Something bad is happening at the BP on Route 41. I'm recording." Every second of this was being documented from every angle. Mossier had no idea how thoroughly he was being watched. When backup arrived, Deputy Aaron Fitch, 6 years on the job, generally considered one of the steadier heads in the department, Mossier gave him a version of events that was not accurate. He described Diane as an unresponsive individual who had been uncooperative and was making unverifiable claims about being a law enforcement officer. Fitch looked at the situation in front of him. He looked at Diane, calm, composed, hands visible, dressed in clean professional clothing with a carry-on bag in the back seat and a phone mount on the dashboard, every detail matching a person in the middle of a long business trip. Then he looked at the badge and credentials sitting on the passenger seat. Something didn't add up. Fitch picked up the credentials and examined them carefully. They were real. Any experienced law enforcement officer could see they were real. The holographic seals were correct. The format matched. The detail matched. These were not props. He pulled Mossier aside. He asked him quietly why they hadn't simply called the Marshal Service to confirm her identity before any of this went further. That was the obvious move. That was the right move. That was the move that would have ended this situation before it became a situation. Mossier said he wanted to take her in first and verify from there. Fitch pushed back harder. He said this did not look right. He said if she was who she said she was, they were making a very serious mistake. He said they needed to verify before going any further. Mossier refused. He said he was the first officer on scene and he was making the call. Diane watched this exchange from 6 feet away. She had seen this dynamic before, the moment where a bad situation either gets corrected by a cooler head or gets made catastrophically worse by someone too proud to back down. She already knew which direction this was heading. Mossier put handcuffs on her, a 17-year federal marshal, in a gas station parking lot, in Tennessee, in handcuffs, for sleeping in her car during a road trip. Do you think what Mossier did in that parking lot was about her being in the wrong place, or something else entirely? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Fitch stood back. He didn't stop it. But his face in the bystander video told the whole story. He knew this was wrong. He knew it, and he let it happen anyway. A decision that would cost him his career path. At the sheriff's department, Diane was processed. She was not panicking, she was not crying, she was not making any kind of scene. She sat quietly in that processing room and watched everything that was happening to her with the eyes of someone who understood exactly how this would end, and exactly what it would cost the people who had put her there. She had been in enough courtrooms to know how this story read. She had built enough cases to know what solid evidence looked like, and right now, the evidence was everywhere. The desk sergeant on duty that night took one look at her credentials and felt his stomach drop. He called the US Marshal Service. Within 4 minutes, confirmation came back. Diane Holloway was an active, decorated federal marshal in excellent standing with 17 years of service. She had a scheduled federal court appearance in Memphis the following morning. She had committed no crime. She had done absolutely nothing wrong. The sergeant looked at Mossier across the room. Mossier's face had gone completely still. The sergeant told him, quietly, with the kind of finality that closes doors permanently, that Mossier needed to understand what he had just done. He had illegally detained a federal officer. He had conducted an unauthorized search of her vehicle. He had handcuffed and transported her to a facility without any legal basis for doing so. He had given false and misleading information to his backup officer at the scene. And all of it, every single second, every word, every action, was on camera. Mossier tried to say he had followed proper procedure for investigating a suspicious vehicle, that he had reasonable grounds, that he had acted in good faith. The sergeant told him to stop talking and go sit down. Diane's handcuffs were removed. Her credentials were returned to her. She was offered a formal apology that she accepted without any change in expression. Then she asked for the names and badge numbers of every officer who had been present at the gas station and here at the department. She asked for the name of the on-duty sergeant. She asked for the department's formal complaint procedure in writing. She documented everything, including photos of her wrists. She was building a record in real time, precisely and methodically, and everyone in that room understood exactly what they were watching. Mossier stood there and watched his career come apart. Diane still made it to Memphis. She drove through the night. She was late arriving, but she was there when the courtroom opened. She did her job. The bystander video went up on social media before Diane even made it back to the highway. By the time the sun rose Saturday morning, it had been viewed 4 million times. By Sunday night, it was being discussed on every major news network in the country. Editorial boards were writing about it, legal scholars were commenting on it, former law enforcement officers were going on television to say they had never seen anything so clearly indefensible. The headline wrote itself, "Federal Marshal arrested while sleeping in car during road trip." The gas station security footage was released within 48 hours through a public records request filed by a local journalist who had covered the sheriff's department for years and immediately recognized the significance of what she was looking at. Watching the two videos together, the fixed security camera and the bystander phone footage, told a complete damning story. There was no ambiguity. There was no way to spin it. The footage was the footage. Diane had done nothing wrong, not a single thing. Every claim Mossier had made about her behavior was directly contradicted by the video evidence. Type accountability in the comments if you believe no one, not even law enforcement, should be above the law when they get it wrong. The Hargrove County Sheriff's Department released a statement saying they were reviewing the incident internally. The public was not satisfied. Protesters gathered outside the department's main building within 24 hours. Civil rights organizations issued statements calling for Mossier's immediate termination and a full independent investigation. A local congressman called for a federal review. The US Marshal's Service released their own statement confirming that Deputy Marshal Diane Holloway had been illegally detained while on an official federal assignment. They announced they were filing a formal complaint with the Department of Justice and would be pursuing every available legal avenue on her behalf. That statement changed the scale of everything. This was no longer a local matter. Federal law enforcement was involved. Federal investigators were already asking questions. The county's small legal team had never dealt with anything like this before. Then Mossier's personnel file started coming out through records requests. He had 8 prior complaints in 6 years of service. 5 of them involved black drivers or pedestrians. 3 of those 5 described behavior almost identical to what had happened in that parking lot. Aggressive approaches with no clear legal basis, followed by searches conducted without proper consent or justification. In every single case, the department had cleared him after internal review. In every single case, nothing meaningful had changed. The complaints had gone in, been looked at by people who worked alongside Mossier every day, and then been quietly set aside. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a pattern. The department had known about it and done nothing. Diane gave one interview to a national outlet 5 days after the incident. She was composed, precise, and devastating in the calm way that only truly professional people can be when they have been deeply wronged, and they know, without any doubt, that history is on their side. "I want to be very clear," she said. "I am not speaking out because this happened to me. I am speaking out because of what this tells us about what happens to people who don't have my credentials, my training, or my resources. What would have happened to someone else in that parking lot? Someone without a badge? Someone without 17 years of documentation behind them? That is the question we all need to be asking." It was the kind of statement that cut through every defense and every deflection. Calm, factual, and impossible to argue with. 3 months after the incident, a federal civil rights lawsuit was filed against Deputy Craig Mossier personally, against Deputy Aaron Fitch for failing to intervene, and against Hargrove County for maintaining a system that allowed this pattern of behavior to continue unchecked. The complaint listed 4 claims: unlawful arrest and illegal detention of a federal officer, illegal search and seizure of a federal vehicle containing sensitive case materials, violation of civil rights under color of law, and deliberate indifference by department leadership to a known and documented pattern of officer misconduct. That last charge was the one that kept the county's lawyers up at night. Deliberate indifference meant this lawsuit wasn't just about one bad night in a parking lot. It was about every complaint that had been filed and cleared, every warning sign that had been dismissed, every moment where a supervisor could have intervened and chose not to. The county's defense team tried to argue that Mossier had acted within his discretionary authority as a patrol officer and had reasonable grounds to investigate a vehicle parked in a public location late at night. That argument collapsed immediately when Diane's legal team presented 3 simple facts. The car had been parked for less than 30 minutes when Mossier arrived, the license plate check had come back completely clean, and Mossier had never once attempted to verify her identity through any available channel before placing her in handcuffs. The defense then argued that Mossier had been unable to confirm the credentials on scene and had acted out of caution. The prosecution responded by presenting the exact training protocol every officer in that department had received on how to verify federal law enforcement credentials. A protocol that included a direct phone number to the Marshal's Service that Diane had also given Mossier verbally at the scene. A number he never called. A call that would have taken 4 minutes, as the desk sergeant later demonstrated, Every defense argument collapsed under the weight of the video, the audio, the training records, and the 8 prior complaints. If you've stayed with this story this far, share it. People need to know these cases exist and that accountability is possible. The case never went to trial. 11 months after the lawsuit was filed, Hargrove County agreed to settle $8.7 million, $5.2 million in compensatory damages covering the illegal arrest, emotional distress, reputational harm, and the professional disruption to Diane's federal career and the ongoing case she had been traveling to handle. $3.5 million in punitive damages, specifically calculated to send a message that went beyond Hargrove County. That number was designed to be felt, to be talked about, to make every other department in the country understand that this kind of conduct has a price that cannot be buried in an internal review or quietly paid out. Every dollar came from public funds. Taxpayers in Hargrove County paid $8.7 million for one deputy's decision to put a federal marshal in handcuffs for sleeping safely in a parking lot. On the criminal side, Mossier was referred for federal prosecution on charges of deprivation of rights under color of law. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to 14 months in federal prison, 2 years of supervised release, and a permanent ban from working in any law enforcement capacity in the United States. He was 34 years old. His entire professional identity gone. Mossier was formally terminated from the Hargrove County Sheriff's Department within 2 weeks of the lawsuit being filed. His state law enforcement certification was revoked, meaning he could never wear a badge anywhere in the country again. He had spent his entire adult professional life building a career in law enforcement. It was over before he turned 35. Deputy Fitch, who had been present at the scene, had recognized that something was wrong, had said so directly to Mossier, and then had stood back and let it happen anyway, was suspended for 30 days without pay. His personnel file was formally flagged. His path to promotion was effectively closed. He had made the right call in the parking lot and then failed to follow through on it, and that failure had consequences. 3 supervisors who had reviewed Mossier's 8 prior complaints and cleared him each time also faced formal discipline. 1 was demoted to a non-supervisory patrol position. 2 others were placed on administrative probation with mandatory retraining. The message from department leadership, now operating under enormous outside pressure, was clear. Being the person who signs off on a problem officer and does nothing carries weight. The Hargrove County Sheriff's Department was placed under a state-monitored reform agreement that required complete overhauls of their complaint review process, mandatory use of independent civilian reviewers for all serious misconduct investigations, new implicit bias and constitutional policing training for every active officer, random quarterly audits of body camera and dash cam footage, and a new early warning system designed to identify officers showing patterns of problematic stops or complaints before those patterns escalate into federal lawsuits. The Department of Justice also opened a broader pattern and practice investigation into the department as a whole, examining every complaint filed over the previous 8 years, every internal review outcome, every training record. What they found confirmed what the data had always been suggesting. This was a department that had developed a culture of looking the other way, of protecting its own at the expense of the people it was supposed to serve. Diane Holloway returned to full duty with the US Marshal Service. She received a formal commendation from her district for handling an unlawful and highly dangerous situation with exceptional professionalism and composure. She did not seek further media attention. She went back to work, back to the courts, the fugitive cases, the details that most people never hear about. But her case had an impact that extended far beyond her personal experience. It was cited in federal training materials. It was studied in law schools across the country. It was referenced in congressional hearings on police accountability legislation. What one deputy thought was a forgettable Friday night parking lot check had turned into a landmark case that changed how departments across the country thought about officer accountability and the verification of federal credentials. The story of what happened to Diane Holloway in that gas station parking lot is not just the story of one bad officer making one bad decision on one bad night. It is the story of what happens when a system fails to hold its people accountable, not once, not twice, but 8 times over 6 years, until the failure becomes so public and so costly that it can no longer be managed quietly from the inside. Diane never asked to become a symbol. She was just trying to do the right thing and get some rest on a long drive to do her job. She was being responsible, pulling off the road instead of pushing through fatigue at midnight on a highway. She was doing everything right, and she still ended up in handcuffs. 17 years of service, 60-plus federal court appearances, 40 fugitive captures, a spotless professional record and 3 commendations, and none of it protected her from being treated as a suspect because of how she looked and where she was from. That reality is uncomfortable. It is supposed to be, because if it can happen to Diane, with all her credentials, all her training, all her documentation, then it can happen to absolutely anyone, and it does happen every single day. To people who do not have a federal badge, who cannot recite a Marshal Service phone number from memory, who do not have 17 years of documented professional conduct ready to back them up the moment they are questioned. If you ever find yourself in a situation like this, here is what matters most. Stay as calm as you possibly can. Keep your hands visible at all times. State clearly who you are, what documentation you have, and exactly where it is located. Do not reach for anything without permission. Ask for badge numbers and write them down. Document everything the moment it is safe to do so, and then report it formally, through every available channel, because the only way patterns like this get broken is when they get documented, challenged, and followed all the way through. Craig Mossier saw a black woman sleeping alone in a car with out-of-state plates late at night and decided, before he even got out of his cruiser, that something was wrong. He had already decided before he knocked on that window. He had already decided before she said a single word. He was wrong. And that decision cost him 14 months of his freedom, his entire career, his professional certification, and his future in the only field he had ever worked in. It cost Hargrove County $8.7 million in public funds. It cost 3 supervisors their positions and a department its independence. It triggered a federal investigation and a state oversight agreement that will reshape that department for years. In this case, justice came. It was slow, expensive, and painful for a lot of people who didn't deserve to be caught in the fallout. But it came. And that matters. Not because it erases what happened to Diane, but because it proves that documentation works, that staying composed and strategic under pressure is one of the most powerful tools a person can have, and that accountability is real when people refuse to stay quiet. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. Stories like this one matter, not just because they are shocking, but because they remind us that accountability is real when people refuse to stay silent, document what they witness, and see things through. If this story moved you, please hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and share this video so more people can see it. Every share puts this in front of someone who needs to know that the truth does come out, and that silence is never the only option. Now I want to hear from you. What was the most shocking part of this story for you? The arrest itself, the $8.7 million settlement, or the fact that Mossier had 8 prior complaints and was never stopped? Drop your answer in the comments below. I read every single one.